Okay, guys. Well, good morning. My name is Tom Conine, and thank you very much, Jorge, for having me out. And I got to tell you guys, my dad is 99 years old. Very happy about that. I was actually with him the other day, and I asked him, "Well, are you gonna get to 100?" He said, "Absolutely." And he's a very wicked kind of guy. And he says, I said, "Well, Dad, how do you know when you're old?" I'm 68 and I'm feeling old. And I said, "How do you know when you're old?" He goes, "Believe me, when I stop buying green bananas, I'll let you know." That's when you get old. I am the president of Tri Corporation, specialist in executive education. I'm also a professor, guys, at Fairfield University, back in Connecticut. You guys know Fairfield? You? Been there for about 39 universities, small Jesuit university. And I've had the honor to be involved in executive education going back actually to 1978, starting with consulting and working for a business in New York called Manufacturers Hanover, the old Manny Hanny in the financial service world, which who knows where they are today. And I knew Bob from GE, and that's how this whole relationship got started. I've had the pleasure to work with numerous corporations all over the world. I'll go through this pretty quickly given the time. Everybody will get everything, Jorge?
Yes.
All of this. Our programs are run all over the world. Literally, we travel nonstop to every single continent, working all over the world. One of my guys was actually in Singapore 2 weeks ago and walked into the elevator, and I was telling Jorge, Steve Forbes is actually in the elevator. So kind of a small world. This is a small listing of some of our clients around the world. The average duration of our client relationship averages approximately 8 years, 7.5 to 8 years. GE is where originally I had met Bob, and of course some of these are no longer clients. Of course they come and go, as you might suspect. Our differentiation in the business, we've had decades of experience doing this. We've got about 15 people in our business. You could see that on our website. All have significant practical experience. Average age is about 57 years old. 16 of the Dow 30 have been clients of ours over the years. We also teach for a lot of our clients' customers. So we teach for a lot of the airlines, for example, in China, for General Electric and their aviation business, to give you an example. All of our corporate programs have corporate-sponsored projects, long-term relationships, and the key here, and what's important for today, is we've got a lot of expertise in virtual business simulations that we've put into all kinds of executive education programs. This is a standard listing of our educational objectives, and the way you want to look at this, guys, is that this is a kind of a holistic, very cross-functional perspective, and it's about balance. It's about balance of short and long term. It's about balance of leadership versus management, but it's all in the context of creating shareholder value. Now, our approach. We have both competitive and collaborative base type simulations. Obviously, we integrate lectures throughout this. We bring in talent assessments. We've got our own variations of 360s that we use actually within our corporate simulations. We bring in real world activities such as operational reviews, which we have actually put within inside the Forbes business simulation. Extensive use of role play is another major characteristic. Now, in the corporate world, what happens is we play typically with what we call worlds. And what that means is that there's 3 teams that would be competing within a world. There might be anywhere from 5 to 7 people on a team. So this would be team 1 in world 1, etc. We often play with multi-number of worlds depending on the program size, and there's interaction effects across these non-competing worlds. It could be from selling intellectual property to variations on secondment, to operational reviews. And of course, we have a control room that naturally runs everything. Now, in a corporate class that's in residence, that's actually a physical space. In the virtual simulation world, of course, we're operating out of wherever. We have literally run virtual simulations. I've run it while traveling across the country on American Airlines, and have run our virtual simulations for clients. This is a week at a glance, actually a program that Jorge visited for Quest Diagnostics, the medical company, and a standard program is about 5 days in duration. There's typically executive leadership that's very involved. This is for the top 400 in Quest. And then what happens is there's a simulation that threads then throughout. So once we start, we're playing the simulation, and it would literally be threading throughout. And in a business like this, what happens in our operational reviews is the senior executives, the C-suite executives, actually come in and run the operational reviews for the particular business. This is our leadership assessment. It's a 360. We've got actually 66 different questions. We have 12 that we use that we know are linked into all the activities that are within the business simulation. And again, there's a balance of soft and hard skill questions here. What happens in the corporate world is people would fill this out coming in, and then at the end, after you've played the simulation, this might be a team, you would do the equivalent of the 360 within the simulation team. So you get to experience the feedback. And of course, we talk about giving and receiving feedback within the simulation team. The virtual simulations. Now, this is what gets actually fascinating. And I started out back in 1986 or 87. I had been at Fairfield 7 years then, when I created what we called at the time our paperless class. And I have never accepted paper, because I know Bob talked about paper before. I haven't accepted paper in a class since 1986. It actually goes back that far. And we started virtual simulations back in the late 90s, actually, at Fairfield at one time. And in the corporate space where it came out of, this is examples of how they would actually work. So let's take GE, for example. Notice the large ellipse here, literally around the world. Of course, a major company in the world, not without its issues today. I think we're all aware of that. But a virtual team might be this, guys. It could be someone sitting in Shanghai, someone down in Singapore, someone in Abu Dhabi, someone in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, someone down in Rio, someone in Palo Alto. That would be a virtual team within the simulation. And imagine operating in that kind of environment over all those time zones, and you're competing against 3 or 4 other teams. That is truly a tripolar type of simulation. For Microsoft, we've done it throughout North and South America, and you can see some of the other examples there. Probably the biggest one is actually for Flextronics. They're one of the largest contract manufacturers in the world. We literally teach all over the world in their factories, and it's a virtual simulation called My Flex Factory that is customized to their business, as nearly all of these are. Now, this is summarized. This is an article from Global Business and Organizational Excellence in July 2014. And I could get anyone a complete copy of how we run the details and all the minutia of our virtual sims at GE, Dell, Microsoft, and a company called Stanley Black & Decker. Those would be some examples that, of course, would actually go into the detail. Now, the virtual sims, we run within our learning management system. And it's our learning management system, of course, that ultimately had to be linked in to Canvas at Forbes, which, of course, Jorge is going to be is going to be speaking about. And that was a very interesting integration, and we all, I think both of us learned an awful lot in putting that together. And what we've done is we've taken everything from the corporate world and we've figured out how to do it in the virtual space in the academic world. So online you have all our role play. You have the operational reviews. You have to write a full annual report. It's probably the most holistic type of exercise that one can go through within an academic program. And Jorge is going to talk to that, and then I will show you guys some examples of that. We also run hybrid programs for companies. And what that means, I know that expression was used before, but a hybrid program, for example, for Dell would be something like this. Back on that map around the world, the virtual team would be running 3/4 in the simulation, and they learn to work as a virtual team. We then bring them into Austin, and now they're sitting face-to-face in a breakout room. Well, I think we all know that's an entirely different expression. What might work well in the virtual space from a teaming and an organization perspective, when those people are sitting together face-to-face, entirely different experience. And one of the benefits of the hybrid is that you get to see both of those worlds. Now, the truth is that many of our clients in the corporate world that were going totally virtual have actually moved back to the hybrid type of space because they want people to understand and go through that working face-to-face, but also being able to work virtually. And we're seeing more of that return. Of course, everyone moved into the virtual space in the corporate world, but we're seeing that return now. So it's more of a hybrid type of perspective. With that, I will turn it over to Jorge and how we got integrated together.
Thanks, Tom. And while I speak, I should have gave you this beforehand. So. Okay, so before I talk about how we integrated Tom's Tricore's platform, I want to kind of go through a criteria that can be used to evaluate simulations. So this looks at four aspects of a simulation. Technology: does the simulation utilize data visualization, data analytics? Does the simulation, is it realistic? Is it real world? Does it have time constraints, budget constraints? Do students have to develop strategies? Response and feedback: does the simulation provide feedback to the student as they progress through the actual experience? What type of visual prompts are provided to the students? And process and outcomes focus. So is there really a goal at the end of the simulation? And do the students really have an opportunity to dialogue with the simulation itself or with students that are learning together with in the course? So with respect to how this criteria measures up against the Tricore simulation, it does well. So Tricore does utilize a technology. It is realistic, as I'll describe in my next slides. It also is process and outcomes focused. So students have to achieve a specific net income when they're playing the actual game, and they do have the opportunity to interact with stakeholders within the actual game. Thanks. So one of the big things I think with any vendor is really building a strong relationship with them. Obviously, I know that Tom mentioned that he's known Bob for many years, but I was just introduced to Tom when we began this project, and it was really important for us to get to know each other, but also for him to interact with our School of Business leadership. Also to meet with the program chair, which is where we were planning on actually deploying his business simulation. We also have within the university a number of different support staff that helps us in the creation of the ultimate course shell. So that includes instructional designers, technology specialists, Obviously, there's a contract piece to it, so we have a procurement department. Instead of just kind of telling those stakeholders that we're going to do this and we're starting next week, we really made an effort of getting in front of them early and explaining to them the history of Tri-Corporation, as well as what the vision for the actual course would be. So we had scheduled multiple face-to-face discussions, and we also actually flew out to New York to Quest Diagnostic, where Tom and his team were actually using the simulation in a hybrid way to one of his clients. So that kind of helped us kind of think through how we could integrate a simulation that otherwise isn't just for the virtual space in our 6-week courses. As a university, we do have requirements for vendors. So any third-party tool that we want integrated into our learning management system, they have to meet the LTI standard. So the purpose of that is so we can easily plug into our learning management system without having to create more code and involved a lot of more architecture on the IT side. So one of the limitations we have as online university is that we have to be careful of where students achieve or where students actually do the work. So we have to be able to track that students are doing work on any given week. So if we are plugging into a third-party tool, then we have to make sure that we're able to pass information from that third-party tool back to our learning management system, which is in the gradebook. So Title IV funding is dependent on that. So the Department of Education expects us to report, how often students are actually doing work and doing key assignments within the LMS. So those kind of are on the technology side. As a school of business, we follow the master course shell model. So what that means is that when a course is taught by a faculty member, the faculty member doesn't create his own course based on the learning outcomes. What we do is that we create a comprehensive course shell that already has all of the key learning activities and all of the content embedded in that course section. And we just run that course section over and over again with different faculty members that contribute their own professional experiences in different areas of the course, such as discussion forums and feedback and assignments. But in essence, that course section runs continuously. So that's something that the vendor needs to know, because obviously on their end, they need to be able to provide that bandwidth on their end and that support. So one of the great things with working with Tri-Corporation is that they provided, they had a team that helped with that integration into our LMS, and they also were very helpful in helping us tweak their virtual or their face-to-face simulation, hybrid simulation, into what we needed in a 6-week course online format. So what was the actual course? So it was the BUS 687 MBA course. So prior to this course, each of our specializations had their own capstone course. So we had 14 different specializations. So we had 14 different capstones. So for us to assess the learning, we'd have to assess it in 14 different places. So so the idea was that this would replace all of those those capstone specializations. So we ended up dropping this into the actual major course requirements as the last course. So what do students do in the simulation? They're in charge of leading a medical device company that produces a medical reader, and the company sells that product to hospitals. For them, they really have to make all of the key decisions. So they have to create a strategy. They need to set parameters with respects to production. They have to interact with stakeholders that have been identified within the simulation. So the first week is just the students going into the actual simulation and learning about the industry. Then they conduct a pretest that is pass or fail, and then they begin playing the actual simulation. So the actual game is not played against the other students. The game is played against the simulation itself. So there are two other competitive companies that are in that industry. One of the main activities that students do in the simulation is that they reflect on the decisions that they've made every week. So the first week is just for them to learn about the industry. The second, third, fourth, and fifth week, those act as specific years or specific quarters within a year. So each quarter, a student makes decisions and then reflects on those decisions in something that is called quarterly business reviews, which is what managers and leaders do in industries. So the faculty members then provide feedback on those quarter business reviews as well as the decisions that they've made. So at the end of the simulation, actually in the fifth week or in the sixth week, the students have to put together an annual report, a short form annual report, where they report back on all the decisions made and where the company is in that last quarter of the year. That's kind of a quick overview of the course, and I know we only have 5 minutes, but one of the big pieces was also identifying faculty to teach this course. So like I mentioned before, we have a large pool of associate faculty members, but since this was the MBA capstone course and this was very different different course design than what we usually offered, we really wanted to make sure that these were the right faculty that had a financial background to provide feedbacks to the students on their decisions, but also that that they were committed to helping the students throughout the course. So this is a really nice piece. This is all of the assessment data. So for each of the QBRs, as you can see, in each of the grading criterias, the students performed distinguished and proficient in each of those criterias. So to date, we have 68 students have gone through the simulation, and now we're currently running about 2 sections per month. We're looking to, it's probably going to scale up to about 5 sections per month. So obviously, that's going to require us to identify more faculty to make sure that we have enough to support all of those course sections. So these are just some of the quick successes. So obviously, how students performed is number one. They do well, even though we didn't design the entire program with this in mind. Usually that's how you design programs, is you start with a capstone and then build everything else after that. We didn't do that, but we were happy that students were prepared to actually do well in the simulation. Now we can assess students in that capstone, all of them in just one place, which is nice. And obviously we were able to build a strong relationship with Tri Corporation and Tom's team. So Tom?
These will be some screenshots, guys, of what students see. This is the first shot. There's a lot of videos that are involved in the simulation. Of course, there's all forms of menus. You can see a little what's called the pre-test up there, which Jorge mentioned. There's an in-basket for all various forms of emails, both internal and industry news. I know this is a lot of detail. There is an academic perspective, a standard SWOT kind of analysis and industry perspective that is completed very early on. This is the role play. There was a picture back that Jorge had from a program he visited at Quest Diagnostics where you might have seen we were sitting with phones in the control room. How that works is the teams in their breakouts might want to talk to their customer. They can call the control room and they can talk to their customer, whomever they would like to talk to. In this world, what happens is you literally just click on one of these characters, and through a form of artificial intelligence with some significant decision trees, what happens is you get to communicate with these people, but it's all through the interaction of the system. It is not voice. It's not voice. We're working on a version where you might actually be able to have voice. That's a little trickier. You can imagine programming-wise. Quarterly decisions. They're made every quarter, and there's all kinds of outputs, as you can see there. There's a quarterly dashboard with just about every conceivable, both financial and non-financial metric that you can imagine. Then there's variance analysis. All of our work is heavy on variance analysis. How well you do relative to your plan, how well you do relative to a prior year, just like people would experience in a real world scenario. We also teach the famous floating bar charts, which are widely used in FP&A type of operations in business. And here's the irony of this. And we've got studies on this that have shown this. Less than 2/3, or no more than 2/3 of finance and accounting professors actually teach this in their real world accounting and finance, but this is widely used in corporations, and where you actually see it taught within corporations are entry-level type business programs. We teach people all of that in this world. This is an example of a quarterly business review that they would have to be filling out, so there's constant learnings. And that's it. So we're right at 9:25 where we promised to be, and I know the president wants to come back with the video, but wanted to leave 5 minutes, guys, for just questions. Anything that we've said. Stan.
So you integrated it with Canvas.
Yes.
Integrated with any other
I'll go grab them.
learning methods?
I'm confident that with our IT team, that we can integrate it with almost any conceivable system. What I use at Fairfield in the virtual version of the simulation, I'll use a form of Blackboard, but mostly operating within Zoom as an example. But we've got our own learning management system that we've been able to integrate right in with that. Would have to know the details and we'll get you in touch with our IT team.
And then I see with them, they played against the computer, but when you do the corporate training, a lot of times you will play against other people.
Correct. So in the corporate world, it would be this. This is a team, you're a team, you guys are a team, the three of you are competing. In this particular version at Forbes, it's played currently as an individual against nature. So if this gentleman here is playing as the participant, he's playing against teams with predetermined decisions. And what happens in that world is everyone that's in the class is playing against those predetermined decisions, so you can actually compare and contrast at the end. Now, we're working on a version that would be totally, as the world evolves, the decisions of these other two teams would constantly be changing as a function of the game. The programming in that is very, very complex, but that's where I'd like to take it. The other one would be that there's been some discussion, Jorge, on a team playing against the other two teams. That's another scenario. And we have it both ways. The only other really academic institution where I brought our games outside from the corporate world is at Purdue University at the Cranert School of Business. And they use one of our games in their capstone event. But that did not come about because of any particular marketing effort on our side. It came about because there was a participant in their executive MBA who went back and said they should bring this game in. So it was a totally different environment.